So let's start exploring more about font and the psychology behind them, and under what circumstances we have to use which family of font. So the first thing when you have to start learning about font, the first thing what you have to do is that you have to know what a typeface is. It is basically a family of font, and each family is used for different purposes. We'll get to that right now. So the first family which we'll be looking at will be serif. So I guess everyone would be familiar with all kinds of font, but then you don't know which category it might come under. So this particular family, serif, is used for conveying something traditional, sophisticated, reliable, practical, and formal. So you can see that when you're normally typing out any business forms or any logo or something which you depict professionalism, you use this serif. So you can. There are a couple of samples on this slide itself, like Baskerville, Deeded, and Georgia and Times, which is very popular. So you can try them out later, and you have to also make sure that whatever font family you're trying out and in a particular design, it pairs well with another design which you're going to use in the same design. So serif normally pairs very well with sans serif, which will be something right below it, or something like script and display, depending on your design. So like you can see that they're very easy to read, so they're used on websites and titles and printed materials, so that they convey some sort of authority. So the next slide shows you some very famous brand logos which have made use of the word serif. So this one way you can identify serif is that you can see that all the letters have a little bit of extra bits at their ends. So like on the G of gap, you can see that is extended a little bit. So if any letter has that, so it normally depicts that it's a serif font. Okay, so there's another example with serif, and then it is a corporate flyer, and they have announced for hiring people. So you can see that when you're pairing it with some other font in the same design, you're pairing it with something a little bit more informal like sans serif. So the body and the header must be different. Okay. The next family we'll be looking at is sans serif. So this is a little informal, a little less formal compared to the other family which we saw earlier. So right now you're aiming for something clean and universal and neutral. So you can try these. You can try these particular fonts, and Helvetica is the most popular one of all. So they pair well with serif and SLAB serif, or modern font, which you can call. So they make a very good font for content, especially because they're easier to read and they're a little more clean and well spaced and organized. So here also you can see that they'll be used for titles and little smaller text which will be easier to read, and logos as well. And next we have some very familiar logos with us, where you can see that they have used sans serif. So this scientifically depicts a little bit of reliance on people and assurance, basically. So you can see that Google, Microsoft, Spotify, and Chanel all use this kind of font to show people that they're trustworthy. And here we have an example of a flyer, and you can see that when you're trying to convey something, you're just trying to announce to people that you are that you're tutoring them. So since it's a tutor for kids, you're trying to be a little informal for them and a little formal for the parents, so that you just get both your tones in the same poster like that. I can see that it goes well with the same font family, and of course modern also. Down, it's right there. Okay, so the next family we'll be coming across is script. So these are a little more elegant and classic, and if you're aiming for sophistication, this is one of the best font to try out. So I think the most common font you can see is Isabella. It's used in almost all of the save the date cards or any wedding invitation or something like that. So again, it pairs very well with serif and sans serif family, and then you use it on a wide scale on invitations or some fancy boutique titles, or fancy boutique logos or some very informal titles. So here are a few logos with script as its font. So you can see that if you're going for something feminine or little female kind of thing, you use this. So, and then also Disney's for kids, and yeah, that's there. And here you have and script is one of the another important reason for script is that it's used for conveying creativity. And this is very important because when you are doing these freestyle freestyle strokes, so you're depicting a little creativity and a little elegance at the same time. Okay. So the next the next font family which we'll be seeing is called SLAB serif, or in other words modern font. So these are the fonts which are used a lot in recent times. So if you're going for something trendy and a little friendly but yet you're solid, so you use modern fonts. So the most common font of them all is Josephine. You can see that you can try them out later, and then they pair the best with sans serif, a little informal with little informal, and then you can see it used on the large scale in logos and titles as well. So here are a couple of logos which use modern fonts. So you can see Supreme, Netflix, Hulu, Gillette. Gillette had a remodeling of their logo. So after the new logo was released with one of the modern fonts. So this is one flyer with an example of modern font. So you're going for a little bit of friendliness yet a little solid and a little sophisticated. Modern font is your go-to font. Okay, so right here we have the synopsis of whatever we have covered so far. So you have serif, which are used to depict tradition, respect, and also comfort and reliance at the same time. And sans serif is a little bit more informal, and then it is used to convey that it's used to convey stability, and it's also very clean. And then there's script, which is used for elegance, affection, and creativity. There's also modern, again, for strength, for progressiveness, and they're used for chic designs. And display is more of a friendly. That's another that's another family where you can see that it's a combination between modern and script. So you're being friendly and also expressive and unique at the same time. Okay, so that's it on the font family. But you have to remember a few more key items when you're choosing the right font. So the first thing is that you have to match your mood to the message. So when you're communicating something through your designs, your font plays the most important role of communication between your design and the target audience. So you have to be careful on what kind of font you choose to convey what kind of message. So as we covered earlier, when you're going for something business and yet a little bit of corporate and casual, you can use sans serif. Or if you're designing any invitation or something like that, you can definitely go for any creative fonts like any of the creative fonts like the script. And each typeface has its own voice, so it depicts a different tone, and then just try not to mix both those tones, because it'll become a little messy in the end. The next thing you have to remember is that you have to match the mood of your audience. So when you're designing something, you have to remember who you're designing it for. So there are a couple of people who you call target audience, and then your design should reach them. So if you're designing some awareness poster, you're doing it for the entire community. So your target audience will cover everyone from maybe 12-year-olds to for around 60-year-old or something. So that's a pretty wide aspect. So in those cases, you have to make sure that your design is complementing both of them. So you're going for something a little more neutral and a little more formal and informal at the same time. Again, sans serif comes into place here. But when you're designing a birthday party invitation for a small kid, that time you make sure that your design is filled with elements here and there, and then you make it a little colorful, and then the content normally is in a little more playful tone. So you use something like script or display, like I said before. So you're using it to convey fun and create, and then a little bit of uniqueness and something suitable for a small kid. The same time, if you the same thing if you're doing it for an adult, a birthday party for an adult, you use some modern text because you're trying to convey something clean and a little mature. So that's on matching the mood of your audience. You have to be very clear, and you have to do your research beforehand, like who is it reaching. Suppose if you're doing it for social media, you have to think who is it reaching for. So that is basically the millennials. So you can go forward with any modern font. Any modern font, it will convey the right amount. It'll convey the right message. And the next thing is that you have to always match your font's point of view to the design context. So when you have a design, you have many elements going on around it. So you have your heading, sometimes subheading, and then you always have the content. So you have to make sure that you prioritize the size of each of these. Wrong. Or that the heading is the biggest of all, as you know, and then the subheading will be a little smaller than that, and obviously the content will be the smallest of them all. So you have to make sure that the size difference is not too much between them or not too little between them, because they might fall under each category, and then it might become a little hard to read. So the one thing you have to obviously assume is the readability of your design to the audience. So you have to always make sure that it's proportional, and you have to make sure that none of them overrule the other. So that telling that, I come to the next point, which is hierarchy. So when you're doing any design and then you want to highlight a particular important context, you have to always make sure that you prioritize that the most. You're giving importance to that the most. So, and by telling that, I guess you can tell. Suppose your design has some sort of timing or venue or something, you can make sure that you highlight only those elements, so that so that when a person sees it, those elements catch their eye immediately. And then you have to also group related elements together, and make sure that you leave adequate line space and word space between them, so that they don't stick together, or they're not very wide apart, so that's very unpleasing for the eye. And then the last part is that you have to always limit your typefaces. So when you're doing a design, you have to keep in mind that if you use more number of fonts, it becomes a little hard for the reader to read it. It becomes a little, and the readability will definitely decrease. So you have to make sure that you avoid doing that. So it's preferable that you use two to three different kind of fonts in one design, and not more than that. And then when you're using the fonts, you have to make sure that they're compatible with each other, so that you don't overwhelm your own design. And also you have to make sure that you avoid clashing colors when you're using the font color. So don't use something like red and bright yellow, so that they're very displeasing for the eye. You don't feel like reading such posters or designs. And then you have to also take care of heavy contrasting colors. And the most important thing is that when you are using font colors, you stick to monochrome. Monochrome designs are basically the tints or shades of the same color, so that when you're using it in one entire design, you don't seem to mess it up. It just seems a little uniform at least. So you have to make sure that you use monochrome preferably. And then again, it depends on your design, but then all of these norms apply to most of the designs. So I guess we have covered everything we can on font psychology. So there are a lot more. And next we will see some tips on how to use Canva.